stance. It's a desperate, there's no words to describe how demonic these people are. And so I apologize for the using non-King's English there. It's just at a certain point, Alfred, don't you ever just want... Did you see all the videos of Libya with the kids with their jaws blown off and their tongues hanging out? And
no, I haven't seen
them
all, that's for sure, but I understand. That was just another atrocity. I mean... that is haunting me now. I mean, I must fight these people. I cannot have this in my name, Alfred. You know that point where you go even beyond fear and it just becomes like you're only afraid of yourself, like controlling yourself? I understand. I'll tell you, you reach a point where what I've come to understand is that your fear is inversely proportional to your faith. You can look at Revelation 21:8, and it's got a laundry list of sins that will get you condemned to damnation. And it includes the sorcerers and the murderers and the liars and the whoremongers and so on. But top of the list, it says in some versions, cowardly, in other versions, those who fear. And the reason is because your fear is inversely proportional to your faith. When you really grab hold of faith and you really get the idea that God is real, and it's not just a little game, and it's not, when you really get it, what do you got to fear? Now, my fear is, I still have a certain amount of fear. My faith is not perfect, but nevertheless, you grab onto that faith, and when you really begin to understand it, you become pretty close to fearless. And if you can get perfect faith, then I assume you can get, you can achieve absolute fearlessness. But it's also...
Okay, well, here's my problem, Alfred. I am fearless, except I realize my fearlessness actually makes me weak at a certain point because I am fearless. And then I realize that's almost reckless. Do you see what I'm saying?
I do. I understand it. It's a fine line. Well, from my perspective, I mean, without knowing you well enough to say one way or another, you have to make up your mind whether you are fearless, from my perspective, in service to what the good Lord wants done, or you're just fearless in a secular and earthly sense, in which case, that may be reckless. You better have a lot of judgment to back that up, because there are some battles that are, you don't want to step into the ring with Mike Tyson unless fearless is not enough to step in with.
No,
Mike
I'm not going to step in the ring with him unless I've got a .357 Magnum.
Yeah, I understand.
No, I mean, at a certain point, they're poisoning the food, the water, and we've got to break out of the trance and say, it's over, scum. I'm done. I see you, and I want to bring you down.
Well, you talked to someone, you used the word satanic, or I believe you're referencing people that are in government. It's not just hyperbole. It really is spiritual warfare. That's what we are dealing with, and it took me a long time to understand that. And I know, 15 years ago, people talked to me about it, and I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. I get it now. That's what this is. This is spiritual warfare. And it's an important concept because most of the people in this country at least pay lip service to the God of the Bible. And you can take their homes and their cars and their kids and their cash, and they won't do much about it. But you mess with their faith, if they understand that you are messing with their faith, they will come after you. There is no war like holy war. And if people can be made to understand the spiritual foundation for the conflict that's going on between ourselves and the government right now, and that it is diabolical. It's not an accident. We look at them in a secular sense. Well, it's not diabolical. Yeah, it is. That's what it is. And once you get
Of course it's diabolical. It's diabolical, diabolical, diabolical. These people are doing it to watch the world burn. It's the journey is the trip. And when you realize they're not giving us quarter, they're not backing off, they don't have some goal of even power. It's all about destruction and pain, and they will not give up. They must be met. They must be faced. We must commit to resist them, period. And when you realize they're a bunch of chicken neck scum, that's what's even more pathetic, it's like watching a little bitty dog dominate some giant, powerful dog. It's such an aberration of the order of the universe. The universe and justice cries out for these enemies of humanity to be brought low.
I agree. But you want to bring them low, you got to get people, from my perspective, help people understand this is spiritual warfare. They'll stand up and fight for spiritual warfare. Again, take the kids, take the car, take the cash, take the house, take all of it. They'll complain, but they aren't necessarily going to fight. mess with their faith, and you're going to have a war on your hands. And it's the one thing the government fears, in my opinion. I mean, they don't want to mess with the people's faith, not overtly, because they know it's an explosive, it's
more than faith, as you said, it's in our gut. But I mean, my issue here is that these people, they are trafficking in men's souls. I think it's a lie to say the root of all evil is the love of money. That's how they sell out unconscious people. They create this money out of nothing. It's all debt-based. The more they create, the more you're in debt. When you get to high-level Illuminati, they are about the souls of men. Revelation says they trafficked in the souls of men. They want your mind. They want your soul. They want your intellect. That's what they want. That's what they want.
What they want is you to consent to your own destruction. They want you to step up. Satan can come down here and put a gun to my head and pull a trigger right now, and it does him no good. All right? It's not enough for him to kill me. It doesn't matter. If I'm right with the good Lord, I'm going to a good place. What he has to do is entice me into voluntarily turning my back on God. That's the objective. If I will abandon my birthright, if I will voluntarily say, well, I don't need that, in the same way that Esau did, say, hey, I don't need the birthright, just give me that bowl of pottage. If they can persuade an individual, if they can persuade a nation to abandon those God-given unalienable rights, then you may be, by that voluntary act, you may open the door where you can stroll right down into Hades. On the other hand, if you're prepared to stand up and say, hell no, I won't go, they have another problem. They need your consent. Force is counterproductive for them, really. They can't capture souls by force. They have to get consent. But
Alfred Adask, give us the website.
Adask, adask.wordpress.com.
I'm the same way. I'm just like you. I grew up going to Baptist churches. I had a relationship with God. But I know God's real. But when I was younger, it wasn't part of my life when I was a teenager. But the more I study the world and history, these globalists, they know about the spiritual. Yep. They're obsessed with it. This is a spiritual battle. This is otherworldly. This is not just man against man. There is a evil force guiding and manipulating this.
I agree. And, I harp on that story about me getting tangled up with the Attorney General down there in Texas. We stopped him. You understand? He'd invested 6 years and nearly $500,000, and we stopped him with a religious freedom defense. It's evidence that the system respects this.
No, the Hopi are allowed to take
mumbo jumbo.
Listen, the Hopi are allowed to take mescaline. I mean, when it gets down to religious, that's one thing the Illuminati bow to, because they've got to trick you to serve them, and they can't run over that. You're right. It's this religious statement is the most powerful because it's universal galactic law.
That's exactly right. So the question is, just got to get people to begin to understand it. And it took me a long time. It doesn't happen overnight. But you start and you come to knowledge eventually, or you come to understanding. It takes time. But and it's one of those things where I think you're already drawn to it. I think in some degree, some people are already drawn to this, whether they've ever heard of it before or not. It resonates with them. Their soul's been looking for it, and they'll catch on. They just need somebody to show them, yeah, that's what's happening. And, one of the most important things, we used to have meetings in Dallas, and people were afraid. Those meetings were successful in large measure because after I got the meeting started, I'd go to the back of the room, sit at the back of the audience, and when the speaker, whoever was the guest, he'd start speaking, I would make it my business. I'm paying attention, and whenever he had an important line, he made a memorable line, or a memorable statement, I'd start clapping my hands. All right? And the rest of the people in the audience would sit there, and they were afraid. But if you persisted at clapping your hands, then they'd start too. They are scared to death to stand up alone. All right? And they are afraid to be the first one to clap their hands. But if you clap, if one person will clap and persist in clapping, eventually other people stand up and say, well, I can clap too. And then They are empowered. They get a sense of communion. They get a sense of community. They begin to realize, my God, I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. I'm not the only one who thinks this is important information. All by itself. It's powerful, powerful stuff. It's part of the reason the meetings grew to where we had the biggest legal reform group in the country there by 1996. It had to do with just something as simple as clapping your hands.
And you put out the Anti-Shyster, right?
Yeah, for 12 years.
Was it Anti-Shyster? Didn't I write some articles for you? I can't remember now.
No, I don't believe I've ever published anything from you in the Anti-Shyster.
What was the other magazine?
Well, I changed the name, and I regret doing it, but I did change the name to Suspicions for the last...
No, there was some other magazine. I remember Vic Vreeland. He was the guy who came up... I came up with the idea, Infowars.com.
Okay.
But he came up with the idea because there's a war on for your mind. He was a retired firefighter, great guy, Air Force guy here in Austin. I think he still lives around here. I got to meet up with him. But I know he liked your stuff then. This was like in '97. I knew you had the Anti-Shyster, but there was another Patriot magazine at the time.
Well, there was...
Media Bypass.
Media Bypass, that's exactly right.
That was Media Bypass. Now, I remember I wrote a few articles for Media Bypass.
Yeah, that's it.
And then that article got to the Austin American-Statesman, and they actually admitted there were special forces, helicopters, and all these drills. I want to go to calls. The number is 877-789-ALEX, 877-789-2539. People always complain by the time I mention the number. They haven't written it down because normally my own studio is a different number than the regular weekday radio show, but it's 877-789-ALEX, 877-789-2539. But Alfred, all I know is I go off my gut and my spirit. And when I talk to you, A, what you're saying is historically right from my own research. B, I feel good when I'm talking to you. I feel, the strength of research, and I feel a bond that you're connected in to the Most High. And when I get into this whole thing of fearlessness, my fear is that I'm so bold and so reckless against the enemy because we're attacking him hardcore. I mean, the stuff going on behind the scenes is insane. But then I realize, well, God's in charge. It's just that then I think, well, if I was more, wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove or whatever, we'd get more done. It's just hard to try to balance it. But you know what? I'm just going with it, and that's the end of it.
That's all you can do.
Yeah.
You got to trust in the Lord. And, if you're doing Lord's will, if it's time for me to go, I don't have an objection. If somebody wants to come up, put a gun to my head and the rest of that sort of thing, pull the trigger. I've had plenty of life. I'd like to get some more and the rest of that, but in and of itself, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of dying badly and stupidly.
No, me neither. Exactly. I'm scared of failing. That's it. I'm scared of dying badly and not continuing my work. That's my only fear.
Yeah. Well, me too. It's hard to understand. I really feel like I've been called by the good Lord to do this. And it wasn't something I was looking for. I didn't start out as a holy roller.
No, I remember 15 years ago, I wasn't even religious.
No. The same thing with me. Pretty much the same thing with me. It was just a casual thing. But you get dragged into this kicking and screaming, whether you like it or not. I don't know. Once you get that, you believe you're called. You don't have any choice. You do it. I'm going to do this until the day I die. That's just virtual certainty. There's no retirement. I'm not planning on retiring. I may have to live in poverty or whatever, but that doesn't disturb me. I'm going to do this. Good Lord, He will present opportunities, and if it's only to talk to one person, sometimes that's all you get. I'll talk to 500, maybe only reach one. Good enough. Good enough. My job is to scatter the seeds. Kind of like Johnny Appleseed. I'm not in charge of making sure the seeds grow. I'm not in charge of harvesting the apples. I may not even get to eat any of the apples. But I am in charge of spreading some of those seeds around, and I intend to do so to the limit of my ability. Good Lord. And I like it. It's a great life. You pay a price for this. It wears you down and it wears you out, and there's a price to be paid, and yet... Can you imagine another life you'd rather have than the one you've got right now?
No, there's nothing more fulfilling than serving life.
Nothing. I'm doing exactly what the good Lord wants me to do. I am doing exactly what I was meant to do. I'm pleased. I live better than most people can imagine. And I have next to nothing, but I guarantee, I know I'm living better than most people can understand. And it's hard to communicate, but I know you get that.
I know. No. Sometimes I say, God, I can't understand this understanding. I can't deal with this discernment. I'm just a blob. I